In this video, we're going to discuss why Secure Tool uses LoRaWAN for all of our IoT products and services. In doing so, we'll look at the basics, how it works, how far it goes, how much coverage you can expect to receive, and how the cost compares to some more well-known telecommunication protocols like Wi-Fi and 4G. Understanding how LoRaWAN works is actually pretty simple. If you know how a cell phone works, you've already basically got it down. On the left-hand side, you have your end nodes. End node is a fancy way of saying sensor. And that sensor can be for pet tracking, tell you where your dog is. It can be for vending machines, tell you when you're out of products. It can also be for automated irrigation systems like Secure Tool does. It could also be for inflow leak stop systems, another Secure Tool specialty. Regardless of what it is, that sensor is there. It's collecting some kind of data, and then it has to get you the data in some way. The way it's going to do that is by emitting or sending out a LoRaWAN signal. You see at the bottom LoRa-RF. RF is radio frequency. And so it will send out a radio signal via LoRaWAN, and that signal will get picked up by the second column, which is a gateway. A LoRaWAN gateway works exactly like a cell phone tower. In order for your voice to be transmitted to another phone, the data has to be relayed through a tower. Same thing for LoRaWAN. In order for your data to be transmitted to your application at the end, it has to be relayed through a tower. And so a LoRaWAN tower will pick up that LoRaWAN signal and then send it to the internet via some sort of link to the backbone, whether it be Ethernet, LTE, whatever it is. It gets it onto the internet, and that's the third column, the network server. From the internet, it goes to your application, which is the fourth column, application server, and it can be any application. It can be the secure AnyStat app, which will give you all the visualizations you want, as well as some control over the network, or it can be your own app. If you already have an app that you're using and you just need the data to come into it, that's possible as well. If you look at the bottom, you'll see it says AES, Secured Payload. AES stands for Advanced Encryption Standard. It's the same standard used by the United States government, so it's relatively secure. You see the arrows go both ways. That means this is a two-way street. Not only can you receive information from your sensor into your app, but you can send information from your app back to your sensor or back to your device. And in doing so, you can actually enable automations, which is how the Secure Tool automatic irrigation system and inflow works. And so let's just take a really quick look, dive deeper into it. This is the Secure automated irrigation package. You have a smart actuator which opens and closes your valve. You have an inflow leak detector which tells you if you've got a leak. You have your soil temperature, moisture, and EC sensor which tells you the soil conditions and whether or not it needs watering. And then you have your weather station for extraneous environmental information. Is it going to rain? How much sunlight are the plants getting? Etc. And so basically what happens is the soil gets too dry. The soil temp, moisture, and EC sensor will send a signal via a LoRaWAN radio frequency to a gateway that is nearby, which we'll discuss later. Once it reaches that gateway, that moisture number, the data is then going to be transmitted to the cloud, to the internet, and then from the internet, it's going to go to the AnyStat app or some other app. If it goes to the AnyStat app, what you've probably done is you've actually programmed a parameter in that says, hey, if my soil moisture reaches below 30%, then open the valve. And so this data comes in that says the soil moisture is at 29%. The AnyStat app will then send a signal back into the cloud, onto the internet, which goes back to the gateway and then out via the LoRaWAN signal to the actuator, which tells it to open. And then that actuator will open, the water will come and irrigate. The moisture sensor is still detecting, and whenever it detects that you've reached the maximum threshold, let's say 70%, it will send a signal back. Once again, through LoRaWAN, through the gateway, through the internet, onto the AnyStat app. And when the AnyStat app sees that the soil moisture reached 70%, and we'll send a signal back the same way, back through the cloud, onto the gateway, out via LoRaWAN to the actuator, which tells it to close, and there's a complete irrigation cycle. And that is how LoRaWAN works. And so the next thing you definitely want to know is, when I say nearby, what do I mean? In this case, nearby meant about 10 miles. And this is not stretching. In fact, if I wanted to maximize the distance of LoRaWAN, this would be a terrible way of doing it. On the far right-hand side, we have our sensor, which is actually up in the mountains. And so there's lots of natural topography, trees, brush, mountains, rocks in the way. And then on the left-hand side, you see Mr. Expert Frost Dinosaur, the name of our gateway, is actually in the middle of the city. And so now you've also got urban topography as well. There are buildings, more trees, cars going by. So not at all ideal conditions to do a distance test, but we still got 10 miles. And so what that means is that distance is really not a concern. Distance might not be a concern, but is there actually a gateway next to me? Chances are yes. There is national coverage for LoRaWAN. You can see all the major cities in the U.S. have lots of green, which means lots of coverage. Even the outskirts, non-major, some rural-looking areas have faint green, which means that there is coverage there as well. In fact, if you zoom in on some of the green, you'll see it just multiplies. This is Phoenix right here, and there's just green everywhere. And so chances are you are within distance of a gateway, and even if you weren't, it's very, very easy to put one up and install it. Like I said, the tower is about a foot. The box fits in the palm of your hand. It can go indoors or outdoors. And so it's a very, very low barrier of entry, even if you are not covered nationally or within your city. And so how much do you pay for this? Everyone is pretty familiar, I think, with how cell phones work. If you have one phone, you pay one device fee and one data fee. If you have one phone plus one watch, then you're paying a device data fee for your phone and a device data fee for your watch. If you also have a tablet, then that goes to 3. And if you have 3 more members in your family, it just adds and multiplies. And so basically every device you have is going to have a SIM card, which is what's shown on the right-hand side here. And so the cheapest plan that we could find online, accessible to anybody, was $3 a month, which doesn't sound like a lot, but let's look at what's really being paid for. First of all, don't forget that's $3 per device. So that can add up pretty quickly, especially if you have a large operation with lots of soil sensors and lots of plants and lots of inflow because you're running apartment buildings. Whatever your situation is, it's $3 per device. But more importantly, you're not using anywhere near 1 megabyte. Like not even close. And you can look at the math on the right-hand side. This is based off the assumption that we'll be sending out one signal, one LoRaWAN signal from the sensor once an hour, every hour, all day. And so under those assumptions, you're only using 0.57% of that 3 megabytes. And so that's a lot of overpayment. And then, like we said, the costs add up per device. Whereas the LoRaWAN, you can cut that in half, no problem. And so $1.50 a month with enough devices and all it scales much, much better than cellular does. And so you can have twice as many devices for the same cost, more or less, which means that you can larger operations or more in-depth operations, or perhaps you want to tweak your sensors a little bit so you get more than just one data stream an hour. Maybe you want to do it twice an hour. You have that flexibility because the price is so much cheaper. And so to wrap things up, let's look at this chart, which nicely sums up everything we've talked about, from distance to price to the amount of data. If you look in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. You both know them. They, relatively cheap, I guess. They're not as expensive as your cell phone bill. They do carry a lot of data. You stream movies off of Wi-Fi all the time, but it's all dead data because you're using less than 1% of 3 megabytes. And so 100 megabytes is way too much. But more importantly, you all know the problem is that the distance isn't there. As soon as you walk outside of your house, the Wi-Fi goes away. If the phones and the speakers aren't touching each other, the Bluetooth never seems to connect. And so there's a big distance problem. You go to the upper right-hand corner and you see cellular, 5G, 4G, whatever it is, and it's expensive. It's really expensive, and you got to pay for every line. And you're not using that much data. You do have the distance, but once again, it's overkill. You're not using that much data, and you're paying for a bunch. You're paying already the most expensive telecommunication and cellular, and then you're paying for dead data, on top of that because you're not using it. And so you drop to the bottom right-hand corner, and you see LoRaWAN. And as a matter of fact, LoRaWAN goes a little bit further than cellular. But it is astronomically cheaper. Can you watch a movie over LoRaWAN? No, you can't. Do your plants care? No, they don't. And so that's why LoRaWAN makes the best option, the best protocol to use out of all the ones that are listed here on this sheet. If you have any more questions about LoRaWAN, be sure to leave them in the comments below. We'll definitely get back to you. If you're interested in all the cool things that LoRaWAN and IoT can do, you should check out our automated irrigation system video, as well as our smart gray water system video. We've also got some videos under the Helium tab showing how to actually set up LoRaWAN networks and gateways. So all that educational information is here available to you. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you keep getting that educational information and you keep getting answers to your questions. Thanks again for watching, and we hope to see you next time.